If you've been living under a rock for a few weeks, well, you might not know that there's a new iPhone on the block, and that therefore pulls the Pixel 10 Pro back into focus as we look at what the 17 Pro can do that Google's phone can't in comparison. We're not going to do a full deep dive into this, but we're going to give some thoughts on where we think Google can improve on the next generation, where they actually are improved over the iPhone 17, and more on top of that. So yeah, let's get into it. If you want more content like this, then do me a solid first and hit subscribe. You get some nice things and we keep you filled up with content just like this. Cheers. So I think what's really impressive about Google's design switch up over the past couple of years is how the company has managed to skirt a fine line between homage and flat out copy. Yes, it does look like some of the older post iPhone 12 models. However, there's a little extra attention to detail paid to make it feel like a Pixel in all of the right areas. And at least on paper, when we start to look at the iPhone 17 Pro Max, it definitely leaves the Pixel 10 Pro in the dust, at least from an internal hardware perspective. That's not what we are here to discuss though, as that A, would be a little bit unfair, and B, it's chalk and cheese, at least in terms of what you're thinking about in terms of hardware, software, all that kind of jazz. Rolling it back just a moment on the physical hardware front though, if we were comparing to the iPhone 16 Pro, which we already have done here on the channel, go check that out, there are a lot of similarities in the dimensions, the shape, the size, all that kind of thing. Google definitely took influences from those previous generations that are noted and then ran with it effectively. With the iPhone 17 Pro Max, I actually think the script has been flipped a little bit. Apple has remixed a remix, as it were. So they call this the camera plateau. Really, it's just a glorified camera bar pulled right out of Google's playbook with the Pixel series. And there's also a return to aluminium. I think that's another minor, but yeah, admittedly tedious decision lifted from Google. In essence, the iPhone 17 Pro is actually the most Android-like Apple device ever released. More on that in terms of software in just a second though. Whether directly or indirectly, Google's design choices for the Pixel lineup clearly have affected how other brands have approached their own phones. That's easy to see here. Either that or the company simply managed to get ahead of the crowd with a common design trait. I would err towards the former rather than the latter. I will say Pixel Snap is another stolen hardware addition that we really love. It cements the Pixel 10 Pro as a bastion for Apple fans not tempted by that iPhone 17 Pro series, and being the first premium Android maker to bring MagSafe over to their devices and support Qi 2.2 as a standard is nothing that we should really gloss over. If you're able to just tap right into that massive catalogue of accessories that already support the iPhone, that's great news. In the US, where Apple still dominates, I think this is going to be a huge benefit for households where there are multiple iOS devices in them. You don't need to do things like throw away or recycle or ditch anything you've already acquired. Case notwithstanding, that is really, really good news for anyone looking to switch, which is something that Google definitely wants people to do. I mean, the hardware's pretty by the numbers. We know what Apple brings to the table and what Google brings to the table. Now, they're both fantastic devices, but so long as Google does not attempt to replicate some of the most heinous areas of liquid glass in their own versions of software and continues to focus on the core experience, I think there is little reason to look at what Apple is doing on a software front, especially in the last, say, 12 to 18 months. We already know just how important Gemini is to the overall experience using a modern Pixel phone. So long as we get more hands-off automated AI tools that don't take center stage or affect how we use our phones, I think it will be a very strong component in future builds as well, as Apple Intelligence has faltered. And yeah, I don't know where that is going in terms of how Apple Intelligence is going to develop and become a core component of the Apple ecosystem. By letting AI be a background focus on your device, you can see significant differences between Google and Apple's recent approaches to software design. Material 3 Expressive is a big step back towards making fun a greater component of your phone and your phone use. Animations have been overhauled for admittedly unimportant sections like the notification shade. Visuals have been refreshed to get deeper into the U of that Material U thing that was started way back with Android 12. And the result is something that is not only playful, it has lots of character on top of that. You probably know already that we're Android people around here, so being critical of iOS is part of our modus operandi. We're biased by our very nature. Despite our choice of mobile operating system, we do though appreciate seeing just what Apple has to offer, as steel sharpens steel after all. This year, I have to say, it's chalk and cheese compared to years previously. Liquid Glass is a very visual overhaul that prioritizes clear elements and semi-transparent layers everywhere. The aim is to create obvious hierarchical structures within headers, menus, controls, and applications. All great conceptually, The result though is an accessibility nightmare of mixed visions and misguided attempts to differentiate iOS from the rest. Blurred backgrounds are just that, backgrounds, and they shouldn't affect how you access something in your main viewport. This oversight means that various controls and menus can be obscured by default due to how well, in some ways, Apple has implemented certain clear glass elements and menus. Credit where it's due, conceptually, this does seem like a great idea. In practice, it is an awful experience, mired in too much clarity, if anything. Simply in adding a fresh coat of paint and improving the day-to-day experience of Android 16 means that Google will undoubtedly profit from Apple's own goal here. To that extent, we're not so sure, but when you need to enable accessibility toggles to make more of your interface usable, you as a developer must concede that you've made a mistake. And we just hope that this isn't going to be the case for Google moving forward. It's also, and when we look at iOS, it's the most bug-ridden version of the software I've ever experienced. I have things like random keyboard lockouts, unrendered UI elements, mismatched animations. For me, it's a mess. And in many ways, funnily, it's the most Android-like experience I've ever had on an iPhone, for better or worse. We know that many Android OEMs will attempt to replicate liquid glass. Google simply needs to stay the course and keep making the sensible design choices that they've made over the past couple of years that won't alienate or copy what Apple is messing up so badly, and keep you out there and me here very, very happy. Whether people are willing to make the jump is another question entirely. Given the chokehold Cupertino has over the smartphone market in certain parts of the world, the US notwithstanding, I do think when Apple fumbles, Google could be poised to capitalize no matter how small their market share gains may be, and market share gains are good for what is technically a niche product. The Pixel 10 Pro has a really good foundation, but with functions like Magic Q being sold as a great time saver powered by on-device AI models, we need more of this to be implemented in areas where people will see and use the function. Apple can't replicate this yet. Google needs to hammer it home as a result and make sure Magic Q expands out into selected third-party applications like WhatsApp for messaging, Outlook for work-related emails, and generally just improve how often you get help like this from your phone, as when it works, is a really, really nice addition. And everywhere else, I do think Google has succeeded quite drastically with Android 16 QPR1. So I will say there were lots of similarities between the iPhone 17 Pro Max and the Pixel 10 Pro XL camera hardware. They're pretty much, well, on paper, they're very, very similar, just put it that way. It's what each phone does with said hardware that is most important. I do think Apple favors less fine-tuning, minimal device processing, and you're given the tools to make your own adjustments if you want to. On Pixel though, we kind of expect one click and done, and that is certainly one of the great strengths of the Pixel 10 Pro this year again. The downside to each approach is apparent though in specific scenarios. For instance, the iPhone 17 Pro Max still doesn't really deal well with skin tones, but Google's real tone algorithm, which has been around for a long time now, means accurate skin colors in practically every single lighting situation. You can adjust things on the iPhone using photographic styles, which is effectively just an editing tool built into the camera application. I do think it would be great to see Google replicate something like this. Instead though, Google is intent on giving budding photographers AI-powered advice and help with things like Camera Coach and even additional options like Add Me, which has been around for a little while as well. I think it's two divergent visions of how to overcome the issues with mobile photography, be that smaller sensors, smaller hardware, all that kind of thing. ProRes Zoom is a great distinction and a great example of this between Apple and Google's approaches. Using on-device models, your photos get enhanced with AI. The results from time to time can be exceptional, and when I've been using this, I've been very, very wowed by this. The problem is, it can sometimes be terrible. The only upside is it's a non-destructive edit, so you can revert back to the original image if you hate the look that the AI has processed. The iPhone 17 Pro Max does have its own upgraded zoom options, but it is an inferior zoom camera in our experience. I do think the lack of post-processing though might be something people prefer from their camera, and I do think Google needs to walk a fine line, as hardware is still super important with the camera system. We can't really rely too heavily on AI all the time, as at that point we're starting to get in the realms of image creation rather than a photo or photography. Sure, I do think add those neat AI enhanced functions that help you take better photos with this smaller hardware on board, but don't over rely on those. Again, credit where it is due, the iPhone 17 Pro Max does more with the physical camera hardware than the Pixel 10 Pro does. that is admittedly obvious when you start comparing the video quality. There is a really big gap between what Apple is doing on device with video and the Pixel with its video boost. It is truly excellent in usage, but it's inconvenient and slows you down if you want high quality clips from your phone. It's also very difficult to recommend to professionals who want pro-grade video, at least pro-grade video recording options in a pinch, and they only have their phone on board. Log video is something that only a few people will use, but it's starting to become a bit more of a standard here and an expected addition on a phone with Pro in the name. I do think Google should really look at this at some point in the not too distant future and add it to their devices. Hey, we could get G-Log at some point, and I'd really like to see that. So you're probably wondering, is the Pixel 10 Pro a worthy opponent to the iPhone 17 Pro devices? Well, I think overall opponent might be a wrong way to describe the Pixel 10 Pro when we frame it against the latest iPhones. There is a lot to like about the past couple of Pixel phones, and some things we really do hope improve, which we've noted in this video. I think in our opinion, the all-important experience of using the Pixel 10 series as Android people is light years ahead of what Apple is offering, specifically with iOS 26. Google needs to continue focusing on making life easier, tasks faster, performance better, and ultimately moving the needle now that they have a really, really solid baseline. At least they set that a couple of years ago with the Pixel 9. If something were, or if someone were looking to jump over that walled garden into Google's, well, admittedly shrinking meadow, then I do think a Pixel 10 Pro would be a really great place to start if the iPhone 17 series really does turn you off. Catering though almost exclusively for iPhone to Android converts really isn't a strong business model, and that's one of our biggest worries here. We still need those aforementioned improvements to ensure that the current Pixel owners remain happy and continue to be customers long into the future. And as Android people, that's all we can really ask for. So long as Google continues to play to the Pixel's strengths, I do think there's no reason that we can't eventually have a device that surpasses an iPhone in every single area. As yeah, for us, software is still the strong suit, and we want to see Google continue to make improvements everywhere else, especially, as I say, video is another one that I'd really like to see. Let me know what you think. Should Google be using Apple as a yardstick, or should the company continue to just keep plugging away? I'm really interested to hear your thoughts, as it's always an interesting conversation to have. iPhone, Android, we know the score. Cheers for watching though, and I will speak to you later.